Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this quick webinar. Our topic today is the problem with cryostorage, and I'm your host, Stacy Willard. Throughout the course of my career, I've worked in a lot of labs, and I've found the same problem to be true in 90% of the labs that I've worked in. The problem is this: what we expect our freezer to look like is not what's really going on behind that door. This meme is a quick example of the different things that people think of when they think of their cryo storage. So what we want it to look like is a nicely organized rack system where we just open the door to the freezer and we know exactly where our samples are. Some labs have a little bit of a better system than we might have, but they're not quite perfect either. Society has absolutely no idea what we're doing, so we'll just skip over that one. Our boss thinks that we're perfectly organized and can find things within a moment's notice. And we think we're doing pretty well. We know we can be better, but we think we're doing pretty well until somebody asks us for one particular sample. And then we realize that what we really have going on in the freezer is a hot mess. That we can't find that sample that we're looking for, or if we can find it, that's a situation that happens rarely, and we have to search through a bunch of different boxes to figure out exactly where it is. And this is something that has plagued me for my entire career and has plagued most of the labs that I've spoken to in the field as well. This happens because of two main storage issues. The first thing is that labs don't know what's in the freezer. And that problem comes up because people leave the lab and they leave 1,000 tubes in the freezer that are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or they leave an organizational system that is difficult to figure out what the commonality is. Sometimes they're not even labeled in a way that we can even decipher. And then also space inside the freezer is not being used efficiently. So we'll have lots and lots of boxes that might have 1 or 2 tubes in them, or we'll have lots and lots of boxes that are really, really full, but they don't work with the current rack or the current system that we have in the freezer. And we don't want to get rid of anything. This monument to the lost sample is meant to represent that concept where we definitely don't want to throw away those tubes that the postdoc left 10 years ago because those could be the one sample that will lead to our Nobel Prize winning work. And I totally understand. I felt exactly the same way when I worked in the lab. But the problem is those tubes might not be being stored properly. And by being improperly labeled, there's really no way we could go back to them and use them for any type of Nobel Prize winning work anyway. So unfortunately, they're just taking up space that could be used better for something else. What we're doing is we're wasting a lot of cryostorage space. In fact, energy.gov estimates that up to 30% of your ultra low temperature freezer, or your -80, is unrecoverable, unnecessary, or completely unidentified. And that leads to a bunch of unidentified freezer objects, or UFOs, like we like to refer to them. UFOs are an unfortunate problem for an ultra low temperature freezer because they increase your number of times that you have to open the door. And every time you open that door, if you can't find what you're looking for, the door is open longer because you're in there searching for things for a longer period of time than is necessary. What you want to be able to do is just open one of these racks, find the tube you're looking for, pull it out, close it, and walk away. But unfortunately, you have to pick up lots and lots and lots of tubes because you're not quite sure where it was, what rack you put it in, what box it's in, what position in the box it's in. That leads to frost accumulation. Frost can accumulate on the tubes themselves, on the racks, on the doors, making the door harder to close. It can accumulate on the seal, which makes the seal of the door less efficient. And that is going to lead to even more trouble finding things. Everything's covered in ice. You can't see what's labeled on the tubes to begin with. And then, of course, UFOs can also lead to issues of stress, less efficiency, and maybe even mass hysteria. So all of this wasted space in your ultra low temperature freezer is actually also leading to increased cost for labs. Energy.gov estimates that an ultra low temperature freezer uses an average of 20 to 30 kilowatt hours per day. That's the same amount as they estimate for an average US household per day. And if we do a couple of quick calculations, we find that for that 25 kilowatt hours that we're using to keep that freezer cold, and if we use the average cost per kilowatt hour in the United States multiplied by the number of days in a year, we come up with a figure of about $1,000 per year that you're spending to keep that ultra low temperature freezer in business at the proper temperature. The more you're opening that door, the more you're keeping the door open, and the more strain you're putting on that freezer, stressing the compressor and making it less and less efficient over time, that increases that cost more and more and more. Then, of course, if you're not packing it properly and you're not using the space efficiently, you're buying more and more and more freezers, which leads to thousands and thousands of dollars per year that your facilities are paying in electricity to keep these ultra low temperature freezers running. And this is not something that we want to do. In biotech, in biology, and basic research, and the life sciences, we're all very interested in making sure that we are working in the most green way that we can possibly work. So efficient organization is then going to save you money, because if you have a large ultra low temperature freezer and you're packing it inefficiently, maybe you can only hold 200 boxes in that freezer. And if you do the quick math on estimates of how much that costs per box, you're looking at about $5.50 per box to keep it at -80. If you efficiently pack that freezer, even if you're doing at 90% of what you really could be, if you have the largest ULT freezer that can hold over 500 boxes, you can get down to on the order of $2 per box to keep that at -80. So you can really save yourself some money. Save yourself freezers. You can save yourself lab space, as we know that is all probably the most limiting factor these days is floor space in a lab. Inefficient organization is actually really common. This is what I used to do when I worked in the lab. So I would have a box that I kept my oligos in, a box that I kept my vectors in, a box that kept my enzymes in, a box for everything. This way I didn't have to at least search through all 100 tubes in the box looking for my oligos. I would know if I went to the oligo box, I was going to find the oligos. I wouldn't know which one inside here was the correct one, but at least I knew what box to go to. And unfortunately, that led to a lot of wasted space because my boxes weren't completely full, and it meant that myself had to have about 10 boxes, and then the other postdoc had 10 boxes, and then all the graduate students had 10 boxes, and you end up with a freezer full of boxes that are not being used to the best of their ability. That's a waste of space. That's increased cost. And then you have a bunch of boxes that are in incompatible organization systems as well. It'd be much better if we had all the same type of box and the same type of rack and they were all properly labeled and we could mix the samples together, right? So what is the ideal software solution that we're looking for when we're looking for an inventory management solution or system? In my opinion, that would be something that had configurable sample locations and types. We don't want to have to go in and use what some company thinks our freezer looks like. We want to create a mirror of our own lab in the software. So we want the freezer in the software should look just like the freezer in real life. So when you open the door to the freezer in real life and you're looking for a sample, you recall exactly what it looked like on that software mirror. We want it to be visual and intuitive. This way we can track our samples very easily and we don't have to go through a very long learning curve to figure out how to find things within the software. We want to know what's in the freezer. We want to be able to track and trace things. So we want to find the samples easily and we want to track how they're being used using the software. We want some type of labeling or barcoding or both. We want to be able to design and print custom sample labels. For certain types of samples, I want certain information on that label. And for other types of samples where there's more room possibly, I want to put more information on my label. I want to be able to determine at each individual sample type what type of information goes on my label. I'm here to tell you that eLabInventory is that solution. eLabInventory can really rescue your lab from its ultra low temperature storage problem. So the first thing you do when using eLabInventory is you create a mirror of your lab within the software. So you match your real life storage locations to what you see within the software. Maybe you've got a couple of liquid nitrogen dewars, you've got a couple of -20s, you've got a couple of maybe some flammable cabinets, you've got some shelves that have chemicals on them, or maybe you have something out of the box that we haven't thought of yet. You can create your own storage location for anything that you can think of to store. Then once you create a mirror of the storage location, you then go in and tell the software how that storage location is actually organized. Does it have racks on the shelves? Do the shelves have the boxes? Or is it just that you're adding bottles to a shelf inside of a refrigerator? Regardless of how you're storing the samples, you tell the software by answering some questions how everything is organized, and then you have it so that it looks like what you see in real life. You customize it to exactly what you see. So in this particular example, you can see my -80 freezer was a specific one that had 3 doors. So there's door 1, door 2, and door 3. When you open up door 1, there's racks on the shelf. And the racks themselves have shelves. So we are using the stainless steel racks from Eppendorf that have the pull-out design, and you can put boxes right on the shelves of the racks. And then the boxes themselves are what's holding the samples. We happen to be using 10 by 10 boxes. Some labs use 8 by 8s, some labs use 9 by 9s, and all you have to do is answer those questions in the software and it will mirror what you have in your lab. Some other things you can do, you can put all of your samples in one box now because you get this really nice visual color-coded organization of what samples are in each box. So now I've got my oligos in the same box as my restriction enzymes, in the same box as my vectors, because I know exactly where everything is within my specific boxes. So this is a way for you to know what's in the freezer. No more UFOs. You can even search for your samples. So if you're about to do an experiment and you need that key antibody or reagent, you can come in, type in the reagent name. It will show you exactly where to go find that sample in your freezer. Maybe you're about to put some new PCR products in or some new type of sample that you've just created in, and you're not quite sure which box has enough space to fit all of your tubes. Let the software tell you. You just click on Find a Free Location, tell the software what freezer you want to put them in and how many there might be, and the software will tell you what box has enough space for those. You can get pretty clever in terms of what type of information you want to store with each one of your samples as well. So not only can you track and trace them, so if you look at the sample page here, you can see you can know exactly where that sample is. This one in particular is in the cell culture -80 behind door number 1, and the first rack on that shelf in box number 3, and it's in position 4C. So we can really track and trace exactly where that sample is. We can even get a unique QR code that's associated with each and every sample. But you can also do some really nice things in terms of making the information you're storing with your samples useful for your experiment, helping you become more efficient in the lab. So not only are you using the software to help you find the sample, but you're also using it to help you be more efficient in getting your experiment started as quickly as possible. So for this particular sample, what you see is you can have custom sample information. So this is a vector. This vector is backbone PBR322, and I've cloned a human gene into this vector. And all I had to do was attach a GenBank file that held an annotated sequence to this sample page, and our onboard DNA analysis software drew this vector for me, and it's actually interactive. I can click on any one of these open reading frames. It'll tell me what the open reading frame is. I can click and do custom enzyme digest and see what the fragments are supposed to be, how big they are. So this eliminates that need to have 3 or 4 different programs open before you can start your experiment. You go right from finding the sample, getting the information you need, go start your experiment. And the barcoding is actually quite useful as well. So if you use the barcoding to print out labels, you can actually use your mobile phone when you're at the freezer to confirm that you've got the right sample that you're taking out. So you can use your phone, scan that barcode, pull up this sample sheet, and just be sure that the tube that you've got is the right one. In addition, we also have full audit trail capabilities. So if you happen to be a GLP or a GMP lab, you need to comply with that FDA 21 CFR Part 11, we have that covered for you in a non-intrusive way. So if you need to figure out what's been going on with your sample, you click on this log, you can see who's used it, what they've done with it, things that they've changed, a time and date stamp, and that's what I'm showing you here. So that full audit trail feature is shown here as an example. So you see who's been accessing it, you see what fields have been changed, what actions have been done. So in this case, it's showing you when I created the sample, all of the data that I put into those fields, and it shows you a time and date stamp for when that happened. Printing labels. So this is one of my favorite parts of the software, is the fact that you can customize exactly what is on each different type of sample label. So what you do is you're going to connect to your lab's label printer, and if you're wondering if your printer is compatible, feel free to get in touch with us. We'll let you know. But basically, if your printer does ZPL programming language, or if it's a Dymo printer, we can connect no problem. And we can send those labels of your design directly to your printer. So imagine this workflow. So I am at the freezer. I know that I'm looking for a certain sample. I've searched when I was on my tablet here, and I found that the sample was in X box and it was in position A2. Pulled out the sample. I confirmed by scanning it that it was the correct sample. And now I've gone back to my bench. I've done my work. I've generated a PCR product. I've entered it into the database, and I can walk over to my label printer, pick up my label, slap it on the tube, and put it all back in the freezer, and I'm done. So nice. So I often get the question, who can use eLabInventory? What types of labs are best for using eLabInventory? The answer is pretty much everybody, but in particular, labs that are GMP and GLP and need track and trace with full audit trail capability, they can definitely use eLabInventory. Our minimum is only 3 users, so we can accommodate that small startup and very small academic lab, which is really nice as well. In addition, we have the right types of installations and the right types of IT infrastructure to be appropriate for the larger pharma companies, research institutes, and hundreds or thousands of users. Contract labs can even utilize the sample tracking and the barcoded workflow functionality. So we can even create a bit of a chain of custody for you if that's the kind of thing that you need as well. In terms of where your data is stored and whether or not it's secure, we have 3 different options for data security, or data storage, sorry. The first is our multi-tenant cloud, and that's the cheapest option. So that basically means that you are reserving a portion of the eLabInventory cloud server. You can have your own private cloud if you so choose. If you have a lot of users, you have a lot of data, or if you have some very particular security concerns, you can have your own private cloud established that is only your server and yours alone. In addition, we do have the ability to work with your IT department to do an on-premises dedicated installation. And so that would be a situation where your IT is administering the server, doing all of the maintenance and upkeep on that server, and we just install our software in there and push updates to you when necessary. So there's 3 different options, so we can be just as flexible as you need us to be in terms of how we deploy the software to your lab. Most importantly, BioITech is ISO 27001 certified, and what that means is you're getting a premium level of data security. And we're happy to discuss with you what that ISO certification means for you, but basically it means that we are complying with pretty much every regulation that you have, GLP, GMP, FDA, HIPAA, all these other types of regulations. And it's very accessible. Another one of my favorite features is the fact that we have freely available mobile apps for iOS and for Android. We don't exclude anybody here, and any web-enabled device can access the software. So an iPad, an Android tablet, a laptop, a desktop, a Mac, an iPhone, and pretty much anything you can think of, you can get your data on that device. You can even go use your phone to walk up to a PCR machine or a piece of equipment in the lab, scan the equipment, and make a reservation for when the next time you're going to need it is. You can move your samples, you can view your samples, you can delete your samples right from your phone. So accessibility is something that is a really, really great feature with the software. So I hope what you've learned from this quick webinar is that we take care of your samples. In combination with the Eppendorf product line of ultra-low temperature freezers, consumables, and BioITech software, including eLabInventory, we're making sure that you know where your samples are and they're taken care of and they're stored appropriately for helping you be more efficient in the lab.